Hello, everybody. I'd like to do a deep dive today into the Pathfinder 2nd Edition remaster, to be specific, class system, and offer some critiques of it and some lessons learned in the development of my own Shatterheart system. Now, there isn't any intention here to do down or do the dirty on another system. I know Cobalt Press, for example, um, got a lot of criticism recently, quite unfairly, for offering some quite legitimate criticism of the new Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. They were entirely legitimate criticisms, like no encounter tables and so on. So, um, uh, so it's not to do the dirty, rather it's to learn. It's to learn how to improve and to build on what are the many good things about the Pathfinder 2nd Edition remaster class system. Well, of course, it's evolved from version 3, 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons, and has got more distinct as time goes on. But in terms of criticism, I think the first criticism is it tries sometimes to be different where it's not necessary to do so. You find that with monsters, you find that with spells, you find that with everything. If an asset in the game, and that could be a class ability and so on, works well or is fixed to work well, then there's no point in being deliberately different if it adds complication and certainly unfamiliarity when players come down to it. If it's going to be different, it should be for a good reason, a well-crafted reason, and a clear-cut reason. Just looking at my notes here. I mean, the second reason I would say is there's just too many classes. I'm not sure how many classes we're up to now with the 2nd Edition remaster. There should be a supplement coming out every 3 months, each one of which has a couple of new classes. So I think it must be over 2025 in classes, and they're spread across separate books. Like with the original 2nd Edition, if you wanted to play a champion, their own version of a paladin and so on, or a monk, it was part of the core classes. Now you have to go to the Player's Handbook 2. This is a bit like repeating the problems of some editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Is too many supplements you have to have in order for everybody to play a game. You can't just say bring your book to the table and say, look, it's part of a core set of classes. The first thing you have to do is if your GM has that book. And I think that's a step backwards. I know there are some technical reasons to do with the sorcerer and so on, where they didn't have certain classes in the first book, but they really should have had the classic core classes in one book, and then some of the frillier, fuffier classes in an expansion. That would be the way to do it. Almost every of the rest of my criticisms to do with feats, and many of these apply equally to Dungeons and Dragons. Well, the first question is, what is a feat? Now, of course, feats originated in some of the class and race specific books in Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, and they weren't really clearly defined or described as feats until the 3rd edition of Dungeons and Dragons, which kind of systematized it, and that was good. But if you go to Pathfinder, go to Archives and Esses, and go to the definition of what a feat is, you find it gives an incorrect definition. It describes it as something that is not part of your class makeup, as an additional specialization. That's a definition of a leveling up feat that can apply to all classes in the chapter on feats. But there are class feats, of course, as well, and actually they're the most important feats because they're the ones you get. You get more class feats than you do general feats in Pathfinder. So this is a problem of terminology here. And it's more than terminology. the focus on class feats as opposed to general feats is good in Pathfinder, because many of the feats in Dungeons and Dragons kind of make players into superheroes, doing things that are unfeasible or impossible, like having night vision. There are feats like that in Pathfinder as well, which I dislike. So the good thing about Pathfinder is the emphasis on class feats. I mean, there are class abilities often in Dungeons and Dragons, but they aren't described as feats always. And again, that's a problem with Dungeons and Dragons in terms of terminology. But if you look at Pathfinder specifically, well, this goes for any role-playing system and many computer games. Really, there's three kinds of feat, or whatever term you use that, like ability. The first is innate. That's something that automatically powers up your character, such as toughness, Dungeons and Dragons, adding hit points. That applies automatically. The trouble is, if you have too many innate feats, characters become overpowerful. The second one is in action, and I include reactions on that. That's something your character can do. Now, Pathfinder is great for tags, but it doesn't have a tag for innate. It doesn't have a tag for action. And that's problematic, because you should be able to look at your character sheet and you say, okay, what can I do? What are these extra actions you can do? And many of them are innate, so they apply automatically. They should have a tag for actions, and they should be described as actions. And the third type is something that enhances either an existing innate feat or an existing action, kind of a tree. And this leads on to the next criticism, is if you have too many enhancements, they become what are called feat taxes. Like if you have something for Hunter's Mark and then Advanced Hunter's Mark, Dungeons and Dragons term, slightly different in Pathfinder, you have to have the first to get the second. Or if it's something that's used all the time in a class and is too powerful not to get, then it becomes a tax. Not just feat taxes, there are spell taxes, because Hunter's Mark is confusingly a spell rather than just a matter of skill, which it should be in Dungeons and Dragons, until it's an ability, a feat, which is better in Pathfinder. So that's a problem as well. And if you have too many feat taxes, it reduces the ability to specialise, because you've used too many of your class feats on making sure that the ability, the action that you've got, keeps up with your level, scales with level. So as a general rule of game design, abilities should scale with level. Now, if you want to have a chosen specialisation in a class which enhances an ability as opposed to enhancing another ability, a choice, then so be it. But as that's over and above the normal scaling you get with levels. And I think there's far too little scaling with level in Pathfinder. That means it has too many class feats, too many feat taxes. I think the good thing about the new 2024 version of Dungeons and Dragons is it scales feats. It scales no other abilities, as they should be called, like Hunter's Mark and so on, and the sneak attack much better with levels. And I think that's an innovation that's been much called for and has been widely welcomed. And Pathfinder needs to go down that track as well. And that leads on to the next problem as well, which is level-based feats. Now, Pathfinder has a system where they give each feat a level, and they can only purchase that feat at the given level. And then you get a feat at level 1 and level 2, the class feats, as we've called them. So in terms of level 1 feats, there's not such a huge problem. You can get 2 feats, but you still have to specialise. If you want to have an animal companion and marking abilities, or sussing out the opposition abilities for a ranger class, for example, you've got to make some choices. And after level 2, it's suboptimal. You can go back and purchase them, but at level 4, when you next get a feat, you're losing out on a level 4 ability, and I don't like that. I don't like that design element to it. Now, it's right that there are some feats that are so powerful they should either only have a level limit on them, or earned automatically as you get to higher levels, or capstone ability, that kind of thing. That's good. But as a general rule, you shouldn't be forced into over-specialising into what effectively is a subclass, not called a subclass. And this is again the problem with terminology in Pathfinder. What is, you have a different terminology in each and every class for the specialisation. Some are called paths and whatever, hard to remember because of the sheer volume of specialisation and so on, how it works. They kind of all work the same, but it would be better if you had a clearly defined system. And I don't like subclasses. From my other videos, I hate subclasses. They force you down a track. They prevent mixing and marching. So, if you're a cleric, you might have a cleric that's specialising in war, or specialising in healing, or specialising in whatever. But you should be able to mix it on a scale, not all or nothing. And these paths force you down. Same with subclasses, force you down a path, and sometimes have quite convoluted abilities as well. The next criticism is there are just too many niche, underpowered, with odd terminology, the silly names. I could go on about this, but if we just open up the PDF here, I'll put it on the screen. Oh, I don't have enough memory on this computer, so it takes about 10 seconds sometimes. I'm doing multiple things with OBS and so on. Here we go. Right. God, no, it's not crashed. It is like pudding, this PDF. You scroll your mouse wheel, and 5 minutes later it goes down one. Well, perhaps here the Ranger isn't the worst one, but many of them have slightly esoteric and rather silly titles, which are not always very descriptive of what it does. And many of them do quite small things. For example, there's Barbarian feat, which enables you to raise your shield as a free action as you charge. Now, of course, raise shield in Pathfinder is an action. It costs an action point, which is correct because raising your shield takes time. However, in my own system, Shatterheart, if you're doing something which is a single point action which you can feasibly do at the same time as you're doing another action, such as moving. You can do that as a free action, and that's rather silly. Imagine the barbarian has charged and you haven't purchased that because you feel it's a bit of a feat tax, and you raise your shield, and the GM says, well, you can't raise your shield because you're striking at the end of your movement. You've used your 3 actions. Da 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 da. Oh, just and there's too many niche feats like that, which make the sheer number of them make it quite hard to manage. Also, I think some of the levels are either too high or too low, and some of the feats like camouflage, that should be a natural low level ability for rangers there, you see. I'll just minimise this because it's not liking this on my system. Too many because it's a high graphic PDF, so it's just sending my system bonkers and slowing it down. Let me minimise that. God, I had to click about 20 times there. Sorry about that. And many of these are really precisely why they work that way is hard to explain in lore. And this is often a general problem with feats. How come magically your character has gained the ability to walk on water? For a monk, yeah, because that's you're manipulating ki, da 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 da. But for some feats and some classes, it's really hard to explain, in kind of diegenic terms, why and how the character has learnt to do something extraordinary. Like some of the ridiculous abilities in Dungeons and Dragons, like Misty Step. Fighters suddenly learning how to teleport. Get the red pen out, I think, with all such ridiculous feats and abilities that can't easily be explained by lore. If you're a psionic race, perhaps, but not otherwise. The next problem is weak or overcomplicated signature abilities, like the equivalent of Hunter's Mark for rangers in Pathfinder. The lack of a proper smite. I know there's a smite which is a high level ability, but then you get an automatic hit with damage with radiance damage, I presume, or is it holy damage with your weapon? But the whole point for paladins, of paladins is they're not barbarians. They're not designed to hit automatically with more damage unless it's a natural enemy. And that's the good thing about smite. It's a holy smite. Damn you, die monster, die aberration. And there's a lack of flavour, I think, particularly at low levels, with not having the classic, particularly automatically at level 1 abilities that should be automatic for all classes. Some classes, like rogues, do get them, but others do not. And you can choose not to get them, which is, I think specialisation should be layered on top of the classic abilities. If a classic ability is you have to purchase it, it becomes a feat task. It's a bad design decision. And many of the abilities, because they're chained together and don't scale, effectively become subclasses by stealth, which I don't like as well. Finally, rather getting towards the end, almost the end, is focus spells. They're not feats, but they're class ability, so I'll put them in the same boat. Although there are some feats which unlock focus spells, which some classes have. The ranger has warden spells, a feat which unlocks it. And they have focus points, but it's not as bad as D&D, where you have some classes with a point system, and some with a dice system, and others with daily or encounter or short or long rest powers, and it's worse than 4th edition. Oh my god, the latest version of Dungeons and Dragons in terms of its complication in how resource management works. If you're going to have resource management, have a proper resource management system, have a mana or stamina point. Shatterheart, my own system, has a clear system of resource management which enormously specialised things. Okay, that's about it. I should say that in my own system, Shatterheart, everything is there's no feat. Everything is an ability, and apart from lineage ability, like the fact that dwarves are stout and hard to knock prone or knock back, everything is a class ability. Some abilities are shared between classes, and that makes things very simple. They're split between an innate and actions, so it's very clear. You get every even number level, you typically get an innate ability, and every odd numbered level, you get an action. There are classes like the wizard where it's where they're mixed together, and the bard spellcasting classes, but for the martial combat classes, split between innate abilities and actions, and the clear rules for actions, and they're clearly marked out as actions, and there are a bit fewer of them. They're designed to be classic. You get at level 1 your classic abilities such as Mark Quarry, which is the equivalent of Hunter's Mark for Rangers, giving Rangers an example, or Smite, and they scale up. And then you can have the additional abilities. The innate will just enhance you, and you can choose any mix of innate you want to specialise in something. For a cleric, for example, that's immune to poison and all kinds of conditions, are kind of tough, or fighters that specialise in tanking, defence, or attack, or flourish, or swashbuckling. And the swashbuckling is not just a class feature, it's shared amongst several classes, so you can have a swashbuckling outlaw, a swashbuckling fighter, a swashbuckling ranger, and so on. There's huge choice here, and everything is based on a consistent resource management system, and there's been a lot of work done on the abilities. We've kept a huge database of all the abilities, of which there are several hundred, and some of these have been refined 15 or 20 times as part of the playtesting to make sure that they're right, they're not imbalanced, and they all fit together. And you can't have monster builds. You have synergetic builds, but you don't have monster builds that break the system with min-maxing and so on. So in the next video, we'll be talking about character creation and how to create a character, or perhaps even more than one, in terms of video, in terms of different classes. If anybody wants to take part in a live stream regarding character creation, then tell me. We'll get several people in on a Zoom call and share it round. Okay, and that's about it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all in the next video.